And let me share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So how many of you were first time joinees for the live session? Ashish, have you been here for the last time?
Yeah, Vasant, I
Okay, you joined the live session already. Okay, I remember Bhaskara. Hello, I think he's on mute. It's fine. Johan, do I spell your name right? Is that Johan or Johan? Okay, he's on mute again. Okay, Mother, hello. Hi, Mother. Can you hear me? Okay, I don't know for some reason everybody's on mute today.
Yeah.
Hi, Sai Kumar. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Vasant.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're joining for the first time here today.
No, no. Last starting onwards,
You're there. Oh, okay, okay. Great. Thank you so much. And
WhatsApp also. WhatsApp also, I have pinged. I have asked a few questions, right? Did you remember?
ah, okay. I remember. Yeah. Oh, okay. Got. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay, fine. Okay, then we'll start with today's session. So today, as I have told you, we'll discuss two topics. So one is the test plan creation, and another one is the collecting requirements for performance testing. Because anything, I mean, like although we have all the tools, we have all the people to work on the performance testing. Before every, I mean, like to use the tools properly or to use the people to effectively use their resources, we must have a plan, right? So this is something like hi Shine. This is something like we are having a plan for building a house. Say, for example, without having a proper building plan, we don't know how to build a house or how to place a wardrobe or how to place the door at the right position or at the right place, right? So this is exactly something like that. You must have a proper plan. So only you have a proper plan, you can follow them. You know where to do. Like say, for example, like in a very common term, let me tell you. So you know you are going to build a house, but you do not know which ground are you going to build. So you have like several grounds, you have like several spaces in a place. If you do not know where exactly you're going to build your house, and if you build your home in another person's property, in another person's layout, it's going to be a completely mess up, right? So this is exactly the same way. So you must know the environment. Where are you going to build, right? And what is your objective? So whether are you going to build a two-story building or whether are you going to build a one-story building, it's something like that. It's like almost same like that. And what are you going to include, whether you're going to build a two-bedroom or whether you're going to build a three-bedroom. So you need to know, understand the scope. And again, like I told you, the environment. So which property, which layout are you going to build the home? And again, um, how many users are we going to use for this process, and how many users are going to use this house? So all these things has to be properly understood even before we okay, no problem, Johan. Yeah, I can understand. Fine. So yeah, so all these things has to be properly measured, all these things has to be properly understood even before we start building or start doing the process, and then say for example, which tools are we going to use? Are we going to use very big machineries? Are we going to use normal machinery? So all these things has to be understood. And what is the risk, what is the mitigations for that? Like say for example, if the particular person who wants to build the house, he wants to get the house ready even before 6 months, so that is again a risk. And what is the mitigation that we have? So all these things, like we need to have the deliverables, we need to have the due dates, and everything has to be ready, right? So this is just an example. Like I just want to correlate this with a real time example. So coming back to the original one, like what are we going to discuss today is the test plan creations. How are we going to build the test plan? So test plan, and that's going to be performance testing, because I hear most of the people, they say, when they say like, okay, I work on performance testing, I create scripts, but I haven't ever worked on performance testing, but I have never worked on creating the performance testing plan. So for those, this is for those who actually um, have no idea like what is happening. So this will actually definitely help you to understand what are you going to do and how are we going to do it. So coming back to this, so when I talk about performance testing plan, performance testing test plan, so it is about we are going to define what a performance test plan is. So this actually talks about outlining the strategy and what is our approach and what are the resources and what is the schedule are we going to use for this performance testing. Let me quickly type it. So this actually involves the strategy, approach, resources, schedule for the testing performance. Just a moment. Okay. And then, so the next thing is like we also will tell the importance, like how uh, clear it should be. Like say for example, it must have the clarity, and we should avoid any scope creep. So when I say scope creep, we should clearly mention that what are we going to test. We are not going to test outside the non-performance testing. Say for example, there is actually a statement like we cannot test everything when it comes to testing. Also we should test only the required changes, and we should test the high priority changes. So all these comes under part of this scope. And then the next part is what are the key components of the performance testing plan. So let me give you the key components here. And it starts with the objective. So when I say objective, we're going to talk about the purpose and goal of the performance testing. Say for example, we must ask the stakeholders about their concerns. Say for example, like we have to discuss with the we have to have discussions, or we have to have meetings with the stakeholders and understand like what is their concerns. Like is that the system's reliability, or is that the speed, or is that the scalability? Some stakeholders might have an issue like, okay, my application is behaving slowly for one particular transaction, or the entire application is down. So this is something that we need to understand. Like, are we going to test the entire application, or are we going to test one particular module or one particular transaction? So all these things has to be understood only when we have a discussion with the stakeholders. So they may say, okay, I don't have issues with my UI. I just have to understand how does the APIs work. So in that scenario, you just have to test only the API. So all these things you can understand only when you have a discussion with the stakeholders. So without that, we do not know. It's something like, okay, when I correlate that with building a home, you just have to discuss with the owner. Like you have to talk with them, right? So he's the one who can tell you like what are you going to build, or what are you going to do in this project. So same thing, you have to discuss with the stakeholder. You have to discuss with it can be the business analyst sometimes, because business analyst is the face of the stakeholder sometimes, or even it could be the business, the end users who are not the end users. Actually, it's going to be the owners of the application. So even they could be the stakeholders. So the stakeholders might change, but it's always the stakeholders whom we have to discuss. And then we have to document the specific goals at the end of the objective. So that's going to be your deliverable. So it can be something like the system should handle 1000 concurrent users uh, during the load test, and the response time should be less than 3 seconds. So this could be the specific goal of your testing. So they might say, okay, for all the transactions, I should have 3 seconds as my SLA. And they also can say that, okay, for one particular transaction, it could be even lesser, or it can be like 3 seconds for one particular transaction and 5 seconds for other transactions. So all these things you have to understand, and these has to be documented as part of your documentation, like your test planning documentation. And then, okay, any doubts with this objective part?
Wasn't shine here. So
Yeah,
this
I can.
objective will be defined by our this one business analyst.
Yes, so sometimes business analyst will be the face. Like they'll be the one who will have a discussion with the business and to us. So they'll act as a bridge between us and the business people, because it differs actually. In some teams you will be having only access up to the business analyst. In some teams, even the developers also could say, okay, because in some team, like, the developers will be like so too much of a senior position and they know everything. So you will have to discuss with them, you have to talk with them, and you have to understand, okay, so this what I'm going to do it, and they will be giving you the requirement. So in every team it actually changes. So you don't all the time, you don't expect the exact end business people for you to talk with you. So I'm giving you an example. Like it can be anybody. It can even be your manager as well sometimes, right? Because they actually will have access to the. It actually differs, right? I mean, like, when we were in a different level, when we were in a different position, you also could not expect all the time for the business to answer you. Wherever you get information and wherever you get the knowledge, you have to work with that.
Thank you. Got it.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then the next part is the scope. So when I talk about the scope, and let me correlate that with the building of the house. So here you will have to understand, okay, what am I going to build? So you know that you're going to build a home. You understood, like, what are the things I have to do, and in this scope part, you will understand. Okay, so when you say I have to build a home with a two-bedroom, so where I have to build, is that in the ground floor or is that in the first floor? So you have to understand all these, and that will come under as part of your scope. So when I talk about the performance testing application, you have to identify the systems. So you have to identify what system am I going to test. So if that, for an example, if that is going to be a retail application, an online retail application, so you have to understand what system out of it I'm going to test, either whether it's going to be an admin system, or whether it's going to be the end user system, or whether it is going to be the databases, the app servers, the web servers. So which part am I going to test? And again, the transactions. So what transactions are you going to test? What modules are you going to test? And what functionalities are you going to test? Say, for example, if in retail application we have a very big it's a very big scope, I would say. There is inventory management as part of it, and you do have to deal with adding cards. So in our example, let me tell you, like, we are going to deal with only the shopping cart, like for the ordering of items. So in that case, you're going to test only those functionalities. Say, for example, adding a wish list, is that working, and how quicker it is working, and converting that wish list to the cart. So I want to add all those items to the cart. So all those things are the functionalities which you're going to test, and for that you're going to identify the systems. Like, when I say identify the systems, you have to understand, like, what are all the app servers and web servers involved for that, and for the database servers, and is there any APIs connected to it, and what are the third parties which are connected to it. So all these things has to be identified, and you have to scope it down. Like, you have to write, like, what all the systems that are involved, and how does that get affected, like, where you, or like, how does your testing affects all those areas. Yeah, Sainath, you have anything to say?
Yeah, hi Vasant. This is the first time I'm joining the session. I have query on the scope here. So you're saying about
Yeah,
the
please.
things, right? Like how many parallel users? Like, are we going to define the scope here itself for the security testing? So you are saying example of the shopping cart. For example, parallel
Mhm.
user, if I hit, I mean like rate limit conditions. So DDoS conditions, are
Mhm.
we going to have this here, or we'll have it in the separately in the security requirements?
Yeah, performance testing only deals with the performance related scope. Security testing will never be part of performance testing. It actually comes under non-functional, but security testing is a separate scope. Like functional testing, security testing is another area. We are not going to deal with that,
Okay.
right? Yeah, because security is again, they have been. I mean, like we use separate tools for that, and again, the objectives also will change. So overall, the objective of performance testing is to check the speed, the quality. But when it comes to security, it talks about the security of the application. So we are never going to touch that area in terms of security or anything. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for asking this question. And yeah, so these are the things actually people might get mixed up. Like they think, okay, when security testing also comes under non-functional testing, so why don't I involve that as part of the performance testing? So all these things has to be properly mentioned. I mean, like even in fact in the scope part, we used to mention two things. One is like in scope and out scope. So under in scope, you will be adding what are all the things you have to um, add, and then under out scope you will mention what are all the things you are not going to test. So all these things has to be mentioned properly. So for example, in our scenario, so when you mentioned are we going to test security testing, so that will come under out scope, out of scope, sorry. So we are not going to test security testing. So this will actually give a clear idea to everybody that okay, so we are not going to test security testing as part of the performance testing plan, right? And then yeah, again, we are say for example we are going to exclude the areas which are not relevant. Say for example certain APIs. Say for example if there are certain APIs which are not relevant to this particular testing, so we are going to exclude that, and any other backend processes we are not going to test that. And but again, what is the examples for in scope? Say for example if you are testing some uh, online cart application, so in that scenarios anything that deals with the online ordering, checking the cart, and ordering, uh, place orders. So all these things will be part of your in scope, and any APIs that are related with that, and any backend uh, APIs related to it, and any batch jobs. Say for example, at the end of the day, we all know that we will send all these data, that whatever transaction that has happened at the same day, so we'll send all those transactions to the common system. So that batch jobs again also has to be tested, and in some of the scenarios I have here that people are asking to test that because they want to know whether is there any issues that happens during the batch jobs and how much time does it take. So all these things has to be tested even before even in the staging environment. So all these things will be part of your scope. So any doubts in terms of scope? Are you clear with the scope? Like wow, so this is how you have to document your test plan. So the reason I'm telling you is so it will help you in two ways. One is it will help you in real time to understand how are we going to work on the test planning, the performance test planning. And the second thing is like this is some of the critical questions that has been asked in the interviews as well. So again, when I want to get you people to be performance testers, so in the interviews they ask you this question. So you must be in a position to tell you that what are the modules that are part of your test planning, right? Okay, I take it as a no, and then moving to the next part, that is identifying the test environment. So here
Yeah,
we deal with yes, Sai. Yeah, hi Sai.
yeah. And this document we have to discuss with any business analyst team, or we have to already prepare the by business analyst team which where to get this document.
You have to create this document.
Okay.
Yeah, performance testers have to create this. And if you have I mean if you have a manager who is preparing it, it's fine. But if you are asked to prepare it, then you must know all these modules, like you know what to prepare, right? So take for example, like someone is asking you to uh, do some performance testing. So before doing the performance testing, you need to have a plan with you, right? You need to have the blueprint. What are you going to do as part of the testing, right? So in that
Okay.
scenario, then you are going to be the sole responsible for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for asking the question. And then moving on to the next part, identifying the test environment. So here we do have four initial things. So one is the hardware. So any idea what comes under hardware? What do we, or what is the scope when it comes to the hardware for any application? Sorry, Sai. Yeah, go ahead.
Does memory count? RAM?
Yes, but can you give a bigger picture for that? Yep, memory. Let me note it down. Memory. Yep, and then we do have CPU.
Then disk bandwidth?
Yep, disk, I/O.
Even network bandwidth comes here?
Yep, yep. So the thing is, all these comes under the metrics, right? But the thing is, when it comes to the test environment, we'll have to first find the servers. So when I say servers, we have to know what is going to be the app server, what is going to be the web server, and how many web servers do we have, and how many app servers do we have, and what is the configuration of it, what is the size of it, right? So we need to understand all these. And okay, yeah. So we need to understand all that part because that's very important. And the reason I'm telling you why it is important is you have to know what is the size of the production, because all the time we are going to test only in the pre-prod environment, whether it could be a stage or it could be the um, pre-prod environment, or it could be an UAT environment. So we have to scale down, or we say, okay, take for example, in the production you have like you have a 16 gig memory machine, and you have like uh, 8 to 10 web service, right? And then you have another 16 gig of memory, and then you do have like 8 to 10 app servers, right? uh, and for database servers, you are using like two machines with 16 gig for database servers. And just imagine they are like having a high set of memories, like they are the virtual machines. But you cannot expect the same configuration in the staging environment or in the pre-prod environment. All you could get is, if you have like 16 gig of 8 to 10 machines, you hardly get two machines with 16 gig in the staging environment, right? Hope you agree with that. And same happens with the web, with the app, and then with the databases, right? It could even get only one databases, and even multiple applications also will be hosted on that. So in that scenario, you should be ready to calculate how much users are you going to scale down. Say, for example, in the production environment, if they were like having 50,000 users, and in the peak time, you have like 12,000 to 18,000 users who are accessing your system. So in that scenario, how are you going to scale down, or what is going to be the scaled down user load for your system? So all these things you need to understand, right? So for that, you need to know the servers, you need to know the server details, right? Let me clear it down. So this is again another reason why we should understand, or why we should have and note all these things down, like what is going to be the server details. And again, you should have a comparison of all these. So coming back to this one, so the first thing is the servers. And yeah, these memory, CPU, disk, input, output, these are the metrics. But again, you need to know the servers for that, because only then you can collect all this information, and then the databases. So you need to know the database details as well, like what is the queue length, what is the memory, and then how many databases you have, and do you have a proper uh, load balancing. So all these things has to be understood. Okay, again I would say load balancing is also part of it. And then coming back to the software. Sorry. So software, you need to know what is the operating system are we using, right? Whether it's going to be Windows, or whether it's going to be Mac, or whether it's going to be Linux. So all these things has to be understood, because you need to understand what exactly the software are we working on, right? And then you need to know what are the testing tools are we going to use for this particular testing, whether it's sometimes it could be JMeter, because the client might say, okay, I have just a web application, and open source is fine with me. And somebody says, okay, I have a load runner, and that application has too many complex transactions, so I need a load runner for testing. And somebody will say that, okay, I have a kind of a medium complex, so I can go with a Neoload. So, and somebody can say, okay, I have just APIs, I'll go with K6. So all this depends on what application you use and how complex it is. So all these differs, right? And even sometimes, like even for a very simple application, yeah, you might also use load runner, or you might also use Neoload. So it always depends, like your client might have paid for that, and so in that scenario, yes, you have to use the available testing tools. So all these things has to be documented, so that's very important. So what tools are you going to use, and what is the licensing, like how many license do you have, right? So that's very important. So it's not just when I say note that just list down the testing tools. It's not just I can write in one line that, okay, I'm having a testing tool that is Neoload, and it's not just enough. You have to understand, like how many license, what is the license you're going to use, and what are the protocols you're going to support, and what is going to be the okay, again, okay, in terms of testing tools, okay, so these are things you have to understand. And okay, how many load generators you have. So all these things has to be noted down. So if, for example, if you are using load runner, you have the load generators. Either it could be the cloud load generator, or if sometimes the client also would have the load generators installed in their location, so you can use them. Or if you're using Neoload, you can use the Neoload web. Or if it is JMeter, they're going to do the master slave configuration testing. So all these things has to be properly listed down. So only then it's just about you as well. First, you need to understand, okay, so you are clear about the requirements. And then the next thing is the network. So when I talk about network, you need to understand the bandwidth. What is going to be the bandwidth, and what is going to be the latency? So when I talk about the bandwidth, you must understand, okay, what is going to be the network, whether it's going to be the internet network are you going to use, or whether it is an application that has been used internal with the internal user. So in that case, so you can just only use the VPN connection bandwidth, right? So you don't need to worry about the normal internet where the people uses. And there's one more thing. So when I talk about the bandwidth, it's very important, because sometime when you are using an application that has been part of the mobile as well, so in that case, you have to test with all the latest 4G and 5G technologies as well, starting from 3G to 4G to 5G, to test how the users will experience the application when they have a lesser bandwidth. So all these things has to be properly understood when it comes to the network. So it's not just about always you have a happy scenario. It's also in some scenarios. I think I have even discussed about this in a previous team meeting. That if a user is in a remote location and he has a very less bandwidth, so that also has to be understood, right? So he again, you have to create the application even with that level of bandwidth as well. So all these things has to be properly understood, and this has to be properly tested and noted down. And then we have to have the architecture diagram. So this is very important, because you need to know how the web servers are connected, and how the app servers are connected, and how many load balancers are between the web servers, the app servers, and the database servers, and what are the APIs that are connected, and what is the microservices, and on top of it, whether it has been hosted on cloud, or whether it is hosted on premises, and whether it is a hybrid. So all these things you must understand even before starting the testing. So any doubts so far in terms of identifying the test environment? Any doubts or any queries?
Vasant, is it possible if any real-time test plan document you can show us when just a sample document or
Real
generic?
time, you mean you want to get me client
No,
testing
no,
document? No.
not a
See,
client. Like
all these I'm
if it
giving
is
as an example, right? So see, the thing is, it differs. Okay, when I say it differs, you cannot take an application where it has only API testing, or whether it has a cloud. So it actually differs for every single application. It actually changes. So you cannot say that, okay, this is going to be the exact one which I'm going to use. So all I'm giving you is a template. You can fit anything in here, because this one will cover everything. Because if I create a document, right, and if that particular thing does not have a thing, if it misses something, then you might not be ever using that. But when you are using these parts, so this is actually a proper templated one, which actually been uh, scrutinized, and it's been scripted from the IEEE papers. So what all the things that you must be add as part of your testing. So that's the reason I'm bringing you all these.
Yeah.
So this is actually from the original one, from the IEEE papers, and from various, based on all these years experience, I have actually created this template. So this has been used and this has been shared across several projects. So these will not actually miss anything. But when you are getting some specific real time, right? So they actually miss something, because all the applications are not same, right? Some applications will deal only with the API, some will deal with only the web applications, and some deal in the cloud, and some are in on premises. So you might be missing some sweet spots,
Yeah, understood.
right? Yeah. So that's the reason I actually always come up with the templating part.
And
Maybe what I
one
can,
question.
yeah, go ahead.
So when we are talking about the software, the operating system and testing
Hmm.
tools,
Hmm.
when it comes to the operating system, we want to know the application is hosted where, in which operating system, like that, or something else. It is. Like,
What is going to be the end? Okay, say for example, you want to test the mobile applications, and some users will release the application in only in Android. Some will use only, say for example, people in US. Most of the people in US use iOS, so they will release only the application in iOS in mobile. Right. So in that scenario, you have to know that, okay, you're going to test only the iOS application, because majority of the users are using it. More than 90% of users are using it. So I'm going to test only with the iOS. Or in some scenarios, you'll know that, okay, these users will use, like these users are more in Windows, or these users are more in macOS, or these users are more in Linux. So you have to understand, like, what is going to be the end users operating system. And again, okay, this in terms of identifying your test environment, so this is going to be your operating system. Say for example, in which environment have you hosted? Like, say for example, your app servers or your web servers could be hosted in Linux servers,
yeah.
right? So in this scenario, it's going to be the uh, operating system of the environment setup, not the end users. But in this scenario, the software which we are dealing is the setup of the system. Like, say for example, I have hosted my application on Linux server. So in that scenario, you're going to test the Linux systems. So the reason why we have to find this is, in terms of monitoring, the you will use different counters. You will use different matrices for monitoring. Say for example, in Windows, you'll have a different monitoring counter for identifying the memory. But in Linux, it could be different monitors. It could be different metrics. So once you understand what operating system are going to use, you can come up with the metrics that you're going to identify, or you're going to monitor for your testing, during your testing.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Any other queries?
Yeah, Vasant, one more question. This is
Yeah,
general
Salil.
question related to
Yeah.
the tool.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
related to tools I have. So in the market, most prominent one is the JMeter, and some other licensing
Yeah.
tools are there from the Smart
Mhm,
Bearer.
mhm.
Like, will there be any
Yeah.
difference between the free tool and the license tool while choosing the test environment? Is that when you consider that as a factor as well, like the results basic
Yeah,
or
there are, say for example, your JMeter also supports mainframes. But just imagine the power of JMeter. So, the capacity. So you cannot run more users when you are using JMeter as a tool for mainframe. But for load runner, it can easily run it. And say, for example, if you want to test the testing with different regions, so you will have to set up master slave, and you must be waiting for someone to give you system access in that location, or you have to build a cloud environment in that machine, and you have to set it up as a slave machine. All these things has to happen. But when it comes to load runner, they always have all the setup ready, right? So you have all this cloud generator setup, and you have the web version of any application. Say for example, when it comes to load runner or Neolode. So the difference between a licensing tool and an open source tool is the support that they give. And if you have any queries or anything, any issues with tools like Loader or Neolode, you can automatically raise with their community, and they will support. But when it comes to Loader Runner, JMeter, you ourselves have to find that, right? Find that issue. Like we can either check it in Stack Overflow or in some other part. So it's not, it's always the support that we get when it comes to the tools. Yeah.
I mean, the output of the test, right? So will be same between those two, like free tools and the licensed tools, apart from the considering extra parameters. Like for example,
It will
if
be
I say,
almost same. Okay. So yeah, go ahead.
for
Yeah, go ahead.
example,
Go ahead.
if I
Yeah, your
want
question,
to
please.
hit one API call for 100 users
Mm,
parallelly, so in JMeter, if
mhm,
I'm able to complete the task in 10 seconds for 100 users parallelly, and
mhm,
same way
mhm.
with other tool which is having license, so will can I expect the same value or it will varies? I mean,
Yeah,
considering
it'll
all
be
the
almost same. There'll
other
be a
parameters
little,
like.
there'll be a milliseconds or microseconds difference, but again, it's always about the API calls, right? So yeah, it should be always same.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, correct. Yeah.
It does not say that,
Okay.
okay, you are using a free tool and I'm going to give you a high response time.
Okay. Yeah.
So almost the reason why there could be a difference is because the system's capacity. Because when you run via load runner, always your
Mm.
machine will be like high with high capacity. Only you can do all these installations for load runner. But for JMeter, even you can do that with this very less space machines. And then if you're using a load runner, you cannot even load generator. You cannot even compare that with the JMeter setup. So there will be a difference, but it will be you cannot even identify the difference. But you see, you're not going to the objective is not going to test between different tools, right? The objective is going to test the application's response times, right?
Correct.
So we have to focus towards that. We cannot say that, okay, I have to test with Loadrunner and I have to test with JMeter and I have to find what is going to be the difference. It's always the objective, like, okay, I have to test the response times of
Mhm.
this particular API call with this tool, and I'm going to identify that. It's not just about doing a comparison. We're not going to sell JMeter or Loader to anybody. All we're going to test is we're going to sell the API that we're going to test. That's it.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Vasant, so
Yeah.
when we are doing a performance testing of any
Mhm,
web application or mobile, or if even I will take a mainframe application,
mhm.
so in performance testing, we are not doing any kind of UI testing, or when we are record and play or whatever we are doing, just is the API which will hit on the server and will get the response. And so at the last, we are testing the APIs only, right? Not the UI and not the like mobile application and not the mainframe, right? So
Yeah, you are not going to test the UI. Yeah, that's right. Because
yeah,
UI, it's always dependent on your system, right? See, the loading of the UI will be very quicker in your high configuration machine, and it will be slower in a normal configuration machine, right? So
that's correct.
it's always not dependent on your the speed of the call or the request. So all we are testing is the request, just the request. So you're going to send a request. Say for example, you want to search for an item, right?
Mhm.
And for searching an item, you will type the items, but before that, all the page or everything, every image or every component will be loaded in your page. And
Correct.
when you are going to search, so you're searching an item, when you click on search, automatically the things will be getting loaded. But the thing is, like, your request will go to the server, and then it will come back from the server as a response to you. So it will be coming to you, but again, it depends on your own configuration. Like, but again, you cannot test all the configurations. Like, you cannot test every different configuration in the world. Like, for example, like, I cannot test, somebody will be using a Mac OS and somebody will be using Windows and somebody will be using Linux and somebody will be using mobile. So you cannot test every combination of it. So all you can test which is, I would say, like, the control you have is the request and response. You do not have control over everybody's configuration.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So we can test whatever is in our control. So that's why we define that in the in scope. So what are we going to test? In some scenarios, people might ask you to test with with particular browser. So that is possible because you have the user agent with you. So you can actually test with that, because people might say that, okay, I have a set of users who use Edge and somebody uses Chrome. So that you can test it by actually having that as the user agent for every single request. So that we can test it, but testing the configuration is not our scope, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other queries before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, some.
Yeah.
Yeah. You test any API, how should you know whether JMeter or load runner?
I think I have told you previously. So it always depends on your client. So if your client has licensing with Roadrunner, you're not going to anyways test with JMeter, right? And if they say I don't have a load runner and you only have to test with some open source application, so in that scenario you have to go with the JMeter. So it all depends on your client's requirement.
Okay.
Okay. Any other queries? Okay, we'll move on to the next one, that is developing workload model. So here we'll define the user types and the behavior. So when I say user type and behaviors, it will be say for example, like 70% of users do the browsing, like they search. Say for example, like I give you an example, like 70% of users will be searching the products. That's always we do with any applications, like even it can be a retail application, or even it can be a booking of tickets, or even it can booking a ticket in a train or in a bus. So actually we do several searches, right, before we even do the booking. So 70% of users like us, we do the searching or we do the browsing, and then 20%, 20% will do the selection, will select, and finally 10% will buy, right? So this is again a simple scenario, but again for this particular so first you have to identify the user types and then their behaviors. Still we have not yet defining the transactions. So when I say transactions, even before, for the browsing or for the searching, you have to do the transaction. So you must not confuse the user type, the behavior, with the transaction. So like for example, if a user is searching, so there are like two types of users. Some users will log in to their log into the application, then they will search. Somebody only during the booking we need to do the login, or even some users will actually do continue as a guest as well. So there are like different types of users, right? So this is why I mentioned as user types. So some users, like they do not want to create a login with all the applications. Then they do not want to remember all the username and password. So what they do is, like, they used to search, do the booking as a guest, and then they get their tickets in the email, and then they go outside. So you have to have a mix of all these. And some users in some scenarios, say for example with IRCTC or with any other applications, yes, the user must have a registered login. So that's why it's always differ. So you cannot always say that, okay, this is going to be the scenario for all my applications. You cannot define that in any of your applications. Every single application will be different from other applications. And coming back to the next part, which is including the scenarios. So you have to include scenarios such as peak traffic. So what's going to be the peak traffic? So you have to identify all these. What is the peak time, and what is going to be the offers, and what is going to be the geographic distribution. So this is very important, because like I told you, if your application is being hosted on cloud, and if you are using an application that has been, say for example, like in terms of geographic distribution, I would say, like if an application is hosted in Mumbai and people were using that in several regions, uh, yes, in that scenario, yes, you need to test about the geographic distribution. Say for example, okay, in terms of cricket, say for example, you are working for a streaming application, and when it comes to cricket, how will the geographic distribution happen? So people from geography like India, from other countries. But other countries, when I say people in Europe, most of the people in Europe do not bother about what is happening with cricket. But people in England, people in other countries like Canada, people in Sri Lanka will watch their matches, right? So that's how actually the geographic distribution happens. So when they say, okay, I just have to test this, so you must have an understanding. Okay, when we are doing all these, so you just have to create distributions in these locations rather than all the other locations. So this is very important in terms of understanding how well your application works and how well your uh, system works. Say, for example, if you are working for some regional language distribution, regional language application streaming. So in that scenario, what happens is, okay, that regional language will be in one particular region. Say, for example, it could be in Karnataka, it could be in Andhra, it could be in Mumbai, or it could be in some other states. So in that scenario, you'll have to understand, okay, what could be the geographic distribution, and this is for one streaming. And there are like several other scenarios. Say, for example, like a retail application, and for other applications in terms of ticket booking, or it could be a retail application, or it could be a banking application. So there are like several other examples as well for this part for developing the workload models. So all you have to understand is what is going to be the user types, what are their behaviors, and you have to understand the peak traffic. So when I talk about the peak traffic, uh, in one particular day, starting from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So that's the usual office hours where most of the people will work on any application. Like, again, there will be like a peak traffic during this time. But again, it's not about all the applications, because when I talk about the video streaming, we all know most of the times we used to watch the matches after 7 or 8, like after we come home. So we watch that. So it always depends on like how or what your application is basically. But when it comes to ordering an item, or whether it's come to searching for tickets or something like that, so always these things are even the banking transactions, they always happens during the 9 to 5. So that it always changes. So you need to understand, okay, what is my application and what is going to be my users and how they are going to behave. So that's the reason we have to define all these workload modeling, and you have to understand the peak traffic, their off hours, and then the geographic distribution, right? Any doubts on this part before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, I have a one doubt for scenario related. Which scenario should I use the load runner and which scenario use the JMeter? How will the differences that?
Okay, so I think you first need to understand you cannot use different tools for one testing, right? If you are testing an application, you have to use the same tool for all your testing.
Okay, I faced this question from UK and like a client related question.
Okay, so your client asked you for which scenario you use load runner, for which scenario you
Yes.
use JMeter.
Yeah, how will the differences that she has asked?
Okay, so in your client location, which tool do you use?
JMeter?
JMeter. Do you have load runner license?
No.
In that scenario, yes, you're going to use JMeter, right? For all your testing.
Yeah, but and they are looking like I am in the on the bench right. I have a client evaluation. Before the client evaluation, it taken the internal evaluation. That purpose I not into the project is on the bench right now.
Okay.
I'm preparing. Yeah, preparing for the client evaluation. Second
Okay.
round. Yeah.
Okay. So how does it deal with the tools then?
Yeah, yeah, she has asked like this question. That's time like
Okay, so in that case, okay, let me tell you this way. So if they ask you like what under what scenario do you use load runner, and in what scenarios do you use JMeter? So in that scenarios, some protocols are not supported by JMeter. Say for example, it could be again I would say when it comes to JMeter, it almost supports everything, but there are like few. Okay, let's take for example, if you are using a SAP application, JMeter does not support SAP. So in that scenario, yes, you'll have to go with load runner. right? So this is one example. So there are like several other protocols. So first, in that scenario, you just have to know what are all the protocols that JMeter supports and what are the protocols that LoadRunner supports. And in some scenarios, LoadRunner has a better support in terms of monitoring tools, like connecting with monitoring tools, but JMeter does not have that much support. So these are some scenarios where you can define, like in terms of connecting the protocols. And again, if you have license, then yes, you have to obviously go with that part. If you have LoadRunner license and if your client wishes you to do the testing with LoadRunner, yes, you obviously everybody will go with LoadRunner. Nobody's going to use JMeter, right? So it always depends on what you have, what is available in the plate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. And coming back to the scenarios, so here you have to define what are all the test types that we're going to test. So I think we have discussed about these testing types in our very first session. What does load test talks about and what is going to be the objective, and what is going to be the end metrics that we're going to collect. So in this scenario, we are going to do a load testing. So if your application demands a load test where you have to simulate the expected user load. So you have to collect all these user loads from the business. You have to understand like what is going to be the uh, peak business load, and then you have to find what is going to be the maximum peak load that we test. And I think we have discussed all this in the first session about the load testing. How are we going to test and how are we going to ramp up and all the steady state. So all you're going to understand is which type of testing are we going to use, whether it's only the load test, or are we going to include stress test, are we going to have spike test, and are we going to involve endurance test. So all these things has to be understood even before starting the test, because sometimes the client must say that okay, load testing is fine, I have to do a scalability testing, or I have to scale the user load and I have to test, or he must say that okay, I need to understand some memory related issues, so please do an endurance test. Or he must say that okay, I just need to find the maximum load the system can handle. So in that scenario, yes, we need to run the stress testing. So all these things you must understand during the collection. So only at this point of time you will know what are the testing types you have to define. And the reason you have to define all these here is only based on this you have to work on the other parts. So when I say other things, you have to understand like what metrics are you going to add, because like I told you, all these tests will have different metrics types. Like for example, your stress test will the metrics of it is to understand the maximum load. You're going to benchmark how much is the maximum load your system can handle. So in that scenario, you're not going to bother about the response times or the error rates. All you're going to see is what is going to be the maximum load your system can reach up to. And then when it comes to spike, yes, we need to check how the application behaves when we are increasing the user load in a quick manner. And then when it comes to endurance testing, you're going to check in endurance testing, you're not going to just test the maximum usage, because all you're going to test the application with like 50% of your load test, and then you're going to check if there are any memory leaks or what is going to be the garbage collection part, right? So in all these things, you're going to the objective will change. So these things will reflect in your metrics part. And then after on top of this, you need to understand what is going to be the test data, because if you're running a load test, you know what is going to be the test data. And if you're going to run a stress or a spike or endurance, you need to collect more user details, right? So in that scenario, all these are like they'll have some continuation in the next steps. So that's the reason we have to understand what is going to be the scenarios, what are going to be the test scenarios that you're going to test as part of our performance testing. So the stress testing is like pushing beyond the limits to test the breaking point. So that's where we do the stress testing. And when it comes to spike testing, we handle sudden surges in traffic. And when it comes to endurance testing, we evaluate the performance over extended periods. So all these things we have to identify before we even move to the next steps.
Volume
So any
testing.
doubts on this one? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Volume testing and failover testing.
Okay. What is the question? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm saying volume testing when we'll conduct the volume testing.
Yeah. See, volume testing, failover testing are secondary type. They are not. They don't come under the primary one, because in the primary one are like the load testing. And because when all you have as a performance tester, as a real performance tester, the real problem is you will have a very less time duration for doing all these steps. So all you have to concentrate only on the primary testing. If in case you do have more time, if you do have a bandwidth to test all the failover and every other testing, yes, we can actually test that. But all the thing is like we have to concentrate mainly on the primary one, and these four actually falls under the primary one. So that's the reason we have to concentrate on this. And if in case the client says, okay, I do this testing, do the other type of testing, yes, in that scenario, yes, we have to do that. But we have to make sure that why are we going to test it, and what are all the objectives, and what are the scope of that. Because if some testing comes in and if it's not going to be part of the original scope, then in that scenario you have to tell them that, okay, see, this has some risks, and because it's not under our scope, and in that scenario, yes, you have to decide whether you're going to test that or not. Right? And any doubts in terms of defining the scenarios? I take it as a no. And moving on to the next one, selecting metrics. Yep, the basic metrics that we need to collect is the response times, the minimum, the average, the maximum, and then the percentile. The percentile times, which has 90%, 95%, and 99%. So we do collect all these as part of the metrics. Yes. And then we do collect the throughput. So how many hits do we achieve in every second, in every minute, and every hour. So that's very important to know the capacity of the system. And then we do understand the error rates. So this is to know what error rates do we experience. Say, for example, if we get a 400 4xx error, 404 or a 400 error, we need to understand, okay, it's an issue with the application, and if it is a 5xx error, it's an issue with the server. So all these things have to be noted down, and we have to collect all this information as part of the metrics collection. And then the system metrics. So far we have collected about the application metrics, and now we're going to collect the system metrics. And they were like the CPU utilization, how much CPU utilization do we have, and how much memory utilization do we have, what is going to be the disk input output, and then the network utilization. So when I talk about network utilization, it is about network input output, how much network do we send and how much do we get. So most of the times the primary ones are the CPU and memory. Not every time we used to deal with the disk and the network, but again, you will have to discuss this with the business, the stakeholders, and understand like what is going to be the impact of collecting, or if we are not collecting them. So based on that, you have to decide on the metrics. But again, I've told you about the very basics one. Yep. So we need to definitely collect the response times, and we need to collect on in the applications metrics. We need to collect the number of past transactions. Yep, that's very important. And then number of failed transactions. Yes, all these things has to be collected as part of your. We'll discuss all these in a test reporting in our later sessions. But yeah, these are the things that we have to collect: the response times, the minimum, average, maximum, the percentile, the throughput, the error rates. What errors are we getting, in the number of past transactions, the number of failed transactions. So all these things has to be identified, and then they have to be documented. And then we have to collect all these system metrics. When I say system metrics, we have to collect the CPU, the memory, the disk input output, the network utilization. So any doubts so far in terms of metrics?
Wasn't one question on the response time.
Yeah.
So do we get any
Yeah.
requirement from the business? Like, for example, this much time, within this much time, I need to get the response, like maximum time. So those kind of values we can expect from the business teams.
Yeah, definitely. They will say that they will always have an SLA, right? So they will say that this particular, in fact, I told you in the very beginning. So they must say that, okay, with this, for this particular transaction, I need to find, or I need to have the response times under 3 seconds, or like less than 5 seconds.
Okay, okay. Yeah, got it.
So in that scenario, what we can do is we have to tell them that what do we observe. Like say for example, they must say, they will say that okay, I need to have the response time under 3 seconds. But what if it comes to 5 seconds? So what is our approach? So in that scenario, we'll have to take that. We'll have to tell that the SLA is breached, that the SLA is failed. We are not able to achieve the SLA. So in that scenario, we have to take it to the developers and tell them that, see, the actual expectation is 3 seconds for this particular transaction, but it is 5 seconds. So in that scenario, you have to tell them that, okay, this has to be tuned. So that is the work of the performance tester. It's not just you do testing and give it to the business and say, oh, my work is done. It's not just that. All you have to do is you have to identify what is your SLA and whether your SLA is passed during the testing. And if it is passed, then it is fine. But if it is not passed, then you have to take it to the developers. You have to tell them that, see, this particular transaction is having this issue, that is the response times are high with this many seconds for this many users. So you have to bring it down, you have to tune it. So whether it could be a database tuning or whether it could be the calls tuning or whatever, any whatever the issues it can be, you have to identify that. And if in some scenarios if you are not able to identify that, but at least you can tell them, right? So this particular transaction has too many response times, so please do check its architecture, like well, from where does the calls come, whether it's an issue with the load balancing or whether it's an issue with the app service, the queue length. So all these things has to be identified. As a performance system, we have to find all these, whatever it's within our scope. So that's our job. Like any queries in terms of metrics? Okay, I take it as a no. And tools, yep, you have to yeah, there was a previous question. What tool are we going to use? Yeah, it also depends. Like whether if it is a JMeter, it is an open source. I Again, this is a choice because if your client does not have any idea like what tool are you going to use, in that scenario you can recommend the tool. Like if they are ready to spend money on licensing, yes, you can choose LoadRunner or NeoLoad, which supports lots of protocols. We'll see all that in a separate LoadRunner session or a NeoLoad session. But for now, yeah. If your business can spend some money on licensing, yes, in that case you can use LoadRunner, NeoLoad, or even IBM Rational Performance Tester. And if you are using a very basic API set of testing, then in that case you can use K6, you can use Gatling. So these are like open source applications which you can use, K6, Gatling, and then you can even test with Locust. So these are some examples where you can use for your application, but it always depends on the client's input as well. So it's not just only we decide on that, because when we decide on this, and if your application does not support that protocol, then in that case you have to move to a different licensing tool, right? And then you have to discuss on the licensing, the ease of use, and the integration options. So all these are very important in terms of the tools. So you just have to understand what are the it's not just about the tools, because on top of this you will have all your monitoring part. Like if your application is being monitored by Dynatrace or by App Dynamics, yes, in that scenario, yes, you have to uh, get that thing connected to your LoadRunner or to your monitoring tools, right? JMeter actually has a lot of plugins that supports. LoadRunner has actually some inbuilt support for connecting all these Dynatrace, App Dynamics, and Datadog, Splunk. So all these connections it has. NeoLoad has connections to Dynatrace, App Dynamics with all APM tools, and yeah, same applies to other tools. But again, K6 Gatling, Locust does not have this, but you can actually view the difference. You can also can always view like what happens in terms of the resource utilization in terms of the other monitoring tools. But yeah, again, when it comes to the tool selection, it always has the dependencies as well, like in terms of the monitoring tools. So that's the reason you have to wisely choose the tools for testing. Yep. Any doubts in terms of testing, choosing the tools, because all these things has to be documented as part of your test planning and test strategy documentations. Yep. Any doubts or any queries in terms of tools before we move on to the next part? Okay, I take it as a no. And moving to the plan execution, so we have to schedule the test run. So how often are we going to test? Whether are we going to test it daily or are we going to test it weekly? So mostly we used to do daily runs. So we used to do um, a first user today, a first test run today, and then we used to collect those reports, and then we used to share with them, share with the business. Or what we do is like we used to do multiple runs, and then we used to create a comparison report. So all this we'll see how to do all these test runs and everything in our original sessions where we do the testing. So, but all we do is we used to run multiple iterations of testing with different loads, with different load testing or with stress testing a spike, and we used to collect all these response times, and then we used to give them like. But all we are doing is what are the testing types that we're going to do and in what dates. So we have to give them the dates like in these, if the application is available on this particular date, so from this date I'll be doing all the testing from this date, and what are the load tests I'm going to do, and what is going to be the user load that I'm going to use. And then you have to define the data requirements. Say for example your test data setup, the data cleanup. If you have a database refresh, yes, all these things has to be properly documented. Say for example, if you are running your test today and then if suddenly some data refresh is happening, you have to be ready for that. So you have to make sure that okay, at least at the end you have to have this data ready until the data refresh is happening, or in case if your application needs some data refresh, some database connection. So in that case, yes, you have to discuss this with the database team as well to make sure that everything works fine. You have to properly do the database refresh, and all the web servers, app servers, everything has to be properly connected and everything has to be properly set for your testing. So that's all about the execution plan. And moving on to the next one, which is the risk risks involved in terms of the testing. So when I talk about the uh, risks, say for example, we could have a network downtime during the execution. So we have to understand the risks, and then the environment instability. So all these are the risks that we can expect during the testing. So what is going to be the mitigation? So we have to, okay, these are the risks, and what are the mitigation plans for this is we have to have a backup environment. Say for example, if some of the environments are not available during the testing, so in that scenario we have to have a backup environment and we have to have a fallback strategy. So all these things has to be properly documented, and these differs for every application. You cannot have the same risk for all the application. Again, the risks will be different for different applications. So all these things only when you document, you know, okay, so this kind of risk is available or this kind of risk is there, and this is going to be the mitigation plan for that. Say for example, in some scenarios what happens is, what if your application is not available, so you already have a test plan, performance testing plan. Say for example, I'm going to start my testing from Jan 6th, but what if your application is not still available on Jan 6th, only it is available in 8th? So that is a risk, right? So in that scenario you have to mitigate that. So how we're going to mitigate that? You have to run several test executions in the same day to uh, schedule your testing plan so that you'll be ready for the sign off. So these are some of the risks when it comes to the performance testing. And then we have the outline of deliverables. So what are the deliverables that you're going to give as part of the testing? So we will share the test results. So when I say test results, we'll share whatever the response times table, what time do we run, and what are the observations, and what are the CPU, the memory graphs, everything, like whatever uh, we observe during the testing, we'll collect all them as part of the test results, and then we'll share them with the stakeholders, and then we'll have to do the bottleneck analysis. Say for example, if you are facing some issues, what is the bottleneck, why is that issues happening, and then we'll have to come up with the recommendations for improvement. So how are we going to improve the performance? So for that, for all these, you have to deliver this as part of your testing. So this has to be documented, right? So what are you going to deliver as part of your testing at the end of your testing, right? So that's very important when it comes to the um, uh, like in terms of deliverables. So what are the things that you're going to deliver us at the end of your testing? So any doubts so far?
No,
Let
Vasan.
me
Good.
exclude this. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll share you the.
Vasan, in
Yeah.
deliverables, we share a test plan also, right? Test plan and test scripts, any
Yeah,
scripts.
yeah. We do that. Okay, again, this is a test plan, right? So what we are discussing so far is
Yes,
the
yes,
test.
yes.
So in this test plan, yes, you have to tell them that as part of your testing, what are the things you're going to deliver.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, performance test planning template. So let me just share this with you at the end. Um, performance test. Okay. So any doubts in terms of this performance testing plan before we move on to the next one? Okay, I think there are no doubts. Okay, fine. We'll move to the next topic, so which is requirement collection. So we all know there are like two types of issues we have. So one is what is going to be the approach for collecting the response to the requirements for new applications, and how well we collect for the existing applications, right? So any idea on this? Any experience in terms of collecting the requirements for new and old applications? Let me just remove this one.
Will we capture the SLAs during the test plan, or will we do it later?
Sometimes it comes as part of a test plan as well. Like, yes, we do have to collect because when you are coming with the transactions, right? So in that transactions, yes, we do have to collect. Like, say for example, if the login transaction, if they say that okay, this particular transaction must have like 5 seconds, and then the next transaction should have 3 seconds, yes. So all these comes as part of a test plan.
Sure. Yeah.
So when you are coming up with your detailed test plan where you give the transactions, say for example, for one particular transaction you have to do like 5 steps. So all these 5 steps, yes, what is going to be the SLA for them?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then requirement collection for new applications. So when I say new applications, this could be in a scenario where your application is a brand new application. You're working on a very new application. So in that scenario, what could be the how will you collect the requirements? Say for example, there could be a lot of difference. Like for example, for an existing application, the requirements could be different. For a new application, the requirement could be different. So in this scenario, we'll see how are we going to collect the requirements. So first it will start. So how are we going to collect that, right? So first thing is like, who are we going to talk with? So first thing is we'll have to discuss with the stakeholders. And we'll have to conduct interviews and workshops. When I say interviews and workshops, we have to make them understand what is our requirement. So we have to tell them that this is what I need. So please help me with this, and who should be part of it. So when I say stakeholders, it could be the business stakeholders, because most of the times when we are doing performance testing for a new application, they might not even know what are we are we going to do it, because performance testing is always a kind of a new area for any business. They know functional testing, they know like automation testing, but most of the people, they do not worry about the quality when it comes to the first time. Very few applications, very few owners know the real reason behind the performance testing, but not you cannot expect that with most of the business people. So that's the reason we have to actually set up this meetings, and we have to explain them, okay, so this is the importance of doing the performance testing. Then you have to get them right in terms of the only then they can get involved in it. Otherwise they won't feel that much involvement in giving you the requirements. They will feel, okay, performance testing is not that much important, just keep it away. So you must actually tell them what's the importance of doing the performance testing even before we are start doing it. So the business stakeholders, and then you must involve the developers, and you must involve the QA team. So when I say QA team, it can be functional automation team, and then the operations team. So when I say operations team, it's the infrastructure team who deal with the app servers, the web servers, and everything, and then the end users, if possible. So if you have the end users, yes, you can very well use them as part of your interviews and workshops. And what questions do you ask? So this is very important, right? So when I say the questions that we ask, so we have to ask them. Say for example, what are the business goals for this application? Because it's a very new application, right? It's a brand new application, so you must ask them like, what are the business goals? So without knowing the business goals, yes, we do not know what we are going to do. So first you have to understand what are the business goals for this application, and what performance expectations do we have in terms of response times, in terms of uptime, in terms of availability. So all these things has to be understood, right? And we have what are the critical functionalities we have to test. That's very important because it's a very brand new. So they might think I have only very few critical functionalities which you can test. Then yes, we have to test. And if they say, okay, this is a particular functionality which I definitely have to test, this can be ignored. So in that case, you have to scope down. And what does the success factors look like in terms of performance? So they might say my performance expectation would be like I have to handle 1000 users. That's going to be my performance expectation. Or somebody might say that my expectation is I have to achieve the performance in less than 3 seconds. So the performance might change for every single user, for every single application, right? What does success looks in terms of performance? Yes, we have to understand that. And are there any compliance or regulatory requirements? Yes, we need to understand that as well. Compliance or regulatory requirements. Yes, we have to understand all these. So all these things has to be questioned, and you have to get the answers before we even start the testing, before you even start doing the performance testing. So this has to be, and this you could understand only when you are dealing with, when you're talking with the stakeholders, right? So any doubts so far in this, in the requirement collection part? Any doubts?
No, awesome. Good.
Okay. Yep. Fine. We'll move to the next one. Just a second. Okay, and then we'll have to review the application documentation. So when I say okay, got it. So when I say reviewing the application documentation, so we'll have to understand the functional and the non-functional requirements. So when I say we have to require so we have to analyze the business requirement documents, and we have to understand the technical specification documents, and we have to identify the performance expectations like response times, the transaction rates, or system availability, and that's what comes under the application documentation, because all these application documentations will already be there, like when the application even start building, so people used to create all these application documentations, right? So in terms of business requirement document, so what is going to be the business requirement document in terms of development? So all these things has to be analyzed, and you have to come up with that. And then the user stories, so you have to review the user stories in the agile framework. Say for example, you have to look for references to performance related criteria and acceptance criteria. So that's very important, because you have to understand like what is going to be the user stories that you have to work on top of it. And then the SLAs and the SLOs. So when I say SLAs, you have to understand, like I told you, right? So what is some users might say, okay, my application, my particular transaction has to have the SLAs less than 3 seconds or 5 seconds. Yes, that's an SLA. And then somebody might tell them that the SLOs are very important. So service level objectives for performance metrics, such as it could be a latency, or it could be an uptime, or it could be a recovery time. So this recovery time comes when you are doing a stress testing. Say for example, when you're doing a stress testing, so what happens is your application might break at some point of time, where once you reach the peak users, the applications might break. And after the applications gets broken down, after a certain point of time, the application has to recover on its own. And that is what we have to find using doing the SLOs. So that's the SLO, the service level objectives. So that's very important in terms of the reviewing the application documentation. So all these things you have to collect as part of your initial requirements, and that has to be documented as part of your requirement collection, right? And then moving on to the next one, the third part, which is conducting the use case and workflow analysis. So this is another important one, because here you will be doing the key transactions. Here you will identify the key transactions, because you know the workflow. Some users are going to do a booking. So when they are doing the booking, what are going to be the key transactions? So first they will go to the landing page, they'll do the login, and then they will search for an item, and then they will select an item, and then they will book that item. They'll do the payments, and then they'll do the checkout. So all these are the key business transactions, right? So that's what you have to do it when it comes to the use cases. And then you have to collaborate with the domain experts to understand the importance and the frequency of each use case. So for example, there would be some SMEs in your team, and they will have to tell you that, okay, so these are some of the things that they have to um, keep it as part of the testing. So in that case, yes, you have to add it as part of your testing. And then you have to understand the user behavior. So when I say user behavior, you have to segment the user type. So some users could be admin to the application, and some users, like I told you, could be a guest user, and somebody could be the authenticated user. So all these things you have to collect as part of your initial testing, with the initial discussions with the business. And then you have to identify like how each user interacts with the system, and how the sequence of actions are included. So all these things has to be identified as part of your user behavior. And then the modeling of traffic patterns. So in this scenario, you have to establish the peak usage times and expected traffic spikes. And you have to include the considerations for seasonal or event-based load variation. Say, for example, if you are testing for an application where they were having a Black Friday sale. So in that scenario, you have to define your scenario. You have to define your application based on that. You have to use more number of users, or you have to use stress testing, or you have to use spike testing. So all these things has to be decided based on your considerations for the seasonal and for the traffic patterns. And moving on to the next part, which is the reviewing of system architecture. So without understanding the architecture of the system, it's very difficult for us to work on the application, because we must understand what are the microservices we have, and what are the key components. Say, for example, it could be API, it could be databases, it could be caches. So what type of caching mechanism do we use? And whether it could be a sticky sessions, or whether it could be any other caching mechanism that is used. So all these things has to be understood even before we start doing our performance testing and any other external integration. So all we have to understand, we have to collaborate with the developers and architects, and we have to understand the architecture of the application architects. And all we are going to understand is whether the application is a monolithic application, or whether it is a microservices based application. And when it comes to the key components, whether it could be APIs, and what are the databases that are connected to it, and what are the caching mechanism that has been used, and what are the external integrations. So when I say external integrations, there could be some third parties that could be connected to our application, so we have to ignore them. So we are not going to touch any third party applications, but we still have to understand that what are going to be the third party integrations that are connected to the applications dependencies. And then we have to determine the data flow. So when I say determining the data flow, say for example, if you are doing an application, you have to understand like how the data flows between the components, between your app server to the web server, to the database server, and to the different systems. And also you have to highlight which areas have potential bottlenecks in terms of the data flows. So all these things has to be identified. Only you can identify only when you're doing the architecture review. And moving on to the next part, which is the workload models. We have to define the workload model. So when I say again, defining workload model is a separate topic, which we have to discuss that separately. So coming back to the workload models, you have to simulate the real world usage, where you have to define the number of concurrent users, and you have to establish the ramp down time for the traffic simulation, and you have to come up with the geographic distribution, where you have to model the traffic distribution across regions if the application has global users, and you have to find the peak and off-peak scenarios, where you have to define both the typical and the extreme traffic patterns to test the application stability. And then moving on to the next part, which is the identifying the key metrics, the KPIs, identifying metrics and KPIs. So here we have to identify the response times, the throughput, the error rate, latency, so whatever we have discussed in the test planning. So all these things has to be understood as part of the testing. And then we have a few more which deals with the, okay, let me take you through them. So identifying the key metrics are the next one, and then we have to collaborate on test environment requirements, collaborate on test environment. So when I say test environment requirements, we have to mirror the production setup. So we do have a production setup, but we cannot touch that in the production environment. So what we have to do is like we have to make sure that we do have a closely resembled setup, closely resembled to the production setup in terms of hardware, in terms of software, in terms of network configurations, and also in terms of data requirements. Yes, we have to identify the test data volume, and then we have to almost simulate that in the production from the testing environment. And then we have to also check for any limitations or resource constraints. Say for example, in some of the applications, in some of the test environments, they will not allow you to have more throughput. They will allow only less throughput or limited throughput. So in that scenario, you have to identify that, and then you have to work based on that. And then risk and bottleneck analysis. You have to identify the potential risks. Say, for example, if there are issues like insufficient server capacity, or if there are any unoptimized queries or any unstable third-party integrations, yes, we have to identify all these. And then if there are any bottlenecks, say, for example, some performance issues, yes, we have to identify them after discussing that with the stakeholders. And then we have to plan for performance scenarios. So we have to discuss with the team, and then we have to understand that, okay, what are the testings, what are the type of testing that we have to do, whether it's going to be a load, stress, spike, endurance, or volume. And then we have to validate and refine the requirements. So we have to, whatever the requirements that we have collected, we have to validate them, and then we have to share those requirements with the stakeholders validation, because it's not just only about us who we are going to decide. We have to collect all these, and then we have to share them with the stakeholders for validations. So in case if they find that okay, everything is fine, then we are good to go. And if they say that okay, some things has to be changed, then in that scenario, yes, we have to wait for them for their approval, and then we have to make changes on that. And then if we have to make some refinements to the requirements, yes, we have to make refinements based on development. And that's all we do with the validation and refining the requirements. And finally, we have to document whatever we have collected as part of the requirements, and then we have to share it with the stakeholders. So what we have to find as part of the documentation is we have to find the objectives, the metrics, and the KPIs, the key performance indicators, the scenarios and the use cases. So whatever the scenarios and the use cases that you're going to test, and the environment and workload models. So all these things has to be identified. And where do we use or how do we document them? So we can use tools like Confluence, or we can use tools like Google Docs, or any tools that your client has. So you have to document all these for easy collaboration. Or in some scenarios, you can email to them, and then you can get a sign off, or you can get whatever their feedback is, and then based on that, you can circulate them for the approval. And you can get the buy-in from stakeholders, from the developers, and from the testers to finalize the requirements. So this is all about collecting the requirements. And any doubts so far you think I miss or I need to add here? Let me even get this as well. Yeah, any doubts, guys? Okay, I'll take it as a no. Fine. Okay, we'll start with the tooling next week. We'll start with JMeter. We'll see the end-to-end how to create a script, how to do the parameterization, correlation, running a test, and how to integrate that with Azure DevOps. So all these things we'll see in our upcoming sessions, and that's going to be more interesting. So if you have no doubts, we can sign off, and then we'll catch up next week. I'll share the meeting details in the group, and yeah, hope you all have a good week. Yeah, we'll catch up next week then. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Vasant.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasant.
Thanks for joining. Thank you.
Thank you, Vasant. Thank you for good session.
Thank you so much. Thank you.